All right, everyone. Welcome to Celio Stats 3. We are doing a pregame meta discussion today, so thank you for everyone who is tuning in early with myself, Tate, and Rahul. I will be producing the stream from behind the scenes. Tate is also doing behind the scenes stuff, and Rahul is one of our casters for the tournament today. So, with everybody getting back into the swing of things with regionals and ICs and real life events happening, I figured it would be good for us to do a little short metagame discussion today before the tournament. Rahul and Tate, do you want to introduce yourselves real quick for anyone who doesn't know y'all?
Sure.
Yeah,
Hey guys, I'm Rahul. I've been playing for a really long time. Really excited to be here. Playing competitive Pokemon is something I've done my about half my life now, and I'm looking for a regional win. That is pretty much all I need. All right, over to you, Tate.
yeah, I'm Tate. You probably know me best from PokeStats. I'm also a player for Undaunted. I've been playing for almost 6 years at this point, which feels crazy to say. I'm not as much of a boomer as Rahul, but we're getting up there. And I guess the goal is always regional win. I think Rahul should get one first. He deserves one at this point, but
Anyone who beats me to one, I just get memed on at this point.
yeah.
So we got 300 over 300 people registered for the tournament today. We also have right now there's a GG Tour tournament going on that started at noon. There's so much Pokemon being played online, and do you guys think that makes the metagame different for these online events than it has been for regional circuits in the past?
I mean, there's definitely a difference, and Rahul can talk about this too, but like when you look at being able to play an online tournament every day on Limitless, the meta is just, if you look day to day on Limitless, you can see sometimes completely different meta games, on Wednesday versus Thursday, right? Which is a little bit different from moving to maybe like a regional every second weekend or something
Mhm.
like that is just slower development of the meta game.
Yeah, I mean, like Tate just said, there's a much quicker change in metagame. Cards are changing much quicker, but I will say that I would not put as much weight on the day-to-day metagame change here. It feels like discovering a metagame is much quicker online, but refining a metagame happens at regionals when those players who are at the top of the table get that practice with each other down to that nitty-gritty the last couple hours before regionals. That's where that magic that we see happen on that championship Sunday really occurs. And we haven't had that with the online circuit really. I think barring
Yeah.
maybe like Players Cup, like global finals.
And part of that too just comes down to people net decking because that's way more common online is you'll see like, okay, this deck won late night on Monday. I'm literally just going to take that exact 60 and play it on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, everyone plays the counter to that deck. And that's basically how that goes because there's not as much innovation in the individual list as we would see in like a regional setting.
Yeah, there's not as much reward for innovation, right? Like
Mhm.
today, like we're playing for a $500 plus cash prize pool, which is great, but it's still nothing compared to a regional event.
Mhm.
Same with the GG Tour tournament today and a whole bunch of online events. Some of the online events, people aren't even playing for prizes; they're just playing to play competitive Pokemon and
Right.
maybe for some codes, cards, and stuff. And for their Twitter post prestige, but um, but so there's also the fact that people aren't trying to create secret decks, and they're not, or if they are, maybe not as much work is going into it, and not as much group efforts going into it as it would for like an IC when teams come with their secret decks like Zoro Control, Zoro Checkmate, even some of just the groups all working on one deck list collaboratively probably isn't being matched with the online events for the most part.
Yeah, I will say I've hit a couple like notable names on PTCGO ladder the past few days that have had list sharing off and have immediately conceded to me. So that's a good sign that we're getting back into that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I've got a deck that I don't like want these like other known players to see. People testing for Utah or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's cool. So let's start with the tournament today, the format's Brilliant Stars. And neither of you are playing in the event since you're working on the staff. So Tate, what deck would you have played today if you wanted to win the event?
Oh god, I was gonna say I would have played Durant because I would have wanted to have fun. But
That's
that's not
why
a
I
deck that's
wanted to
gonna.
ask. That's why specifically for you, because I knew your answer was
Yeah.
going to be Durant or Suicune Hammer. So that's why I said if you want to win the event.
If I wanted to win the event, the answer changes. I mean, I think Mew is probably I would have either gone between like Mew or maybe Ice Rider. I think I like Cash's Ice Rider list a lot right now. And maybe I mean I know I'm like really giving a I'm not settling on one option here. I also like Dark Box, so I would have probably picked one of those three decks. Because I think I would have a good chance of like at least getting to phase 2 and top cut with one of those.
Mhm. How about you, Rahul?
I think Mew is probably like the safest pick, especially in my hands. I feel like it's one of those decks where it really caters to my playstyle.
Mhm.
But a deck that I've been kind of playing on stream a lot and that I've been favoring is probably what I would have brought today, kind of to limit test as well, try to win. It's like an Arceus Rapid Strike Urshi plus Birds deck, and the idea behind it is just simply to beat everything that isn't Mew
Mhm.
and have a slight fighting shot against Mew. But obviously, I think all Arceus decks have that one turn where Mew just kind of gains the tempo on them, and you have to kind of pray. But I
Yeah.
think the deck can beat single prize Dark. It can beat like every single prize deck. Realistically, it destroys Durant. It beats all the other Arceus decks significantly well. So that would have been something I tried to limit test with today,
Mhm.
and see where it takes me.
Cool. Sounds
Yeah,
good.
it feels like there's still a lot of room to like innovate with Arceus. Like that hasn't been anywhere close to like not necessarily that there even is going to be an optimal Arceus list because there's different things you can put in the deck, but like I think there's yet to be some broken Arceus stuff that people are going to come out with in the next few regionals.
Yeah, I mean, Rahul mentioned Arceus with Rapid Strike Urshi VMAX and the birds, and that's something I've seen from Japan, but not a lot of people in like the play limitless environment have been playing that. I can't even say I've seen anybody playing that yet, although that was a deck I saw from Japan, and obviously Rahul has his eye on it, and I think that is something people are missing because the VMAX plus Arceus decks have been overperforming for me because you can actually take a hit, whereas the Arceus plus 2 prizer decks just sometimes feel a little bad because they just your attacker just gets blown up by everything in the metagame.
Right.
So the most popular deck for the GG Tour tournament that started a few hours ago was Mew, and by a long shot, over 20% of the players played Mew
Yeah.
VMAX. Is that like what do we do about that? Like at what point does everyone just start playing dark decks to get a free matchup against 1 out of 5 players?
I mean, it's not even quite that Dark is a
Yeah.
free matchup, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we've learned that for the past format, showed us that okay, Mew is still going to beat these Dark decks a decent enough chunk of the time that you can't say the matchup is free at all.
Right.
So that's about what I would have expected. I mean, I would have expected 20% Mew metagame. That's about what we've been seeing in these kinds of events.
So the most accurate comparison I think I can draw to what's happening in our current format with Mew, Arceus, and like the single prize Dark deck is very reminiscent of our Buzzrock format, where Buzzrock was like far and away like the king of that format.
Yeah.
And anyone who thought that Buzzrock wasn't like myself was just fooling themselves because they didn't want to play Buzzrock, and the mirror was like absolutely abysmal. So we're in a very similar scenario to that. And decks were playing like 2 copies of Mew EX and
Yeah.
Mewtwo and stuff like that to even
Yeah.
beat it, and they weren't winning consistently. And that's exactly how I feel about single prize Dark. So it's like,
Yeah.
and even if you play single prize Dark, RCS has a fantastic matchup into you. So you're like just getting gobbled up by these Arceus decks who probably have a
Right.
better shot of actually beating Mew than you do, unironically.
Yeah.
Okay, so does Mew just stay this good then for this format, you think? Does it stay the 20% deck and not get exploited for it?
I would think that there are probably better players than myself who are better at innovating, per se, and they will find an answer. Once the metagame is more fleshed out, it becomes a lot easier to do it. Like players like Grant Manley always find like that niche deck that kind of counters 2 of the top 3 decks really, really well. And that doesn't really happen until the middle to late game of the format. But I think early format, we're always going to see the more aggressive, the more dominant decks always perform, and then their counters will perform naturally because of what's going on. I think this weekend Brisbane will be a good indicator, or not this weekend, sorry, next weekend,
Hmm.
of what'll happen. But also keep in mind that Brisbane is going to be a much smaller regionals, so there's more room for wonky stuff to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So the only decks coming in even close in the GG Tour metagame from Eugenisect are Arceus, Moltres, Birdbox, and then Arceus Steraledon VMAX, but they're at 7% and 5%. Arceus Steraledon going down to 5% after Riley won the Full Grip Games tournament last week. Arceus Steraledon was reaching like 15% kind of meta shares in some Limitless events, and now it's dwindling down a bit. What do you guys think about RC Steraledon VMAX? Was it a fad and people are going to find counters now, or does it stay as a solid top deck, Tate?
I mean, I think it's still good. I don't think the deck is bad at all. I mean, I think people maybe are either just like Mew has been proven to be like winning these tournaments for like 3-4 months now, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense that people will just fall back to Mew because they know that it's safe and it can beat its counters a good amount of the time. Duraludon's a little bit less of a known quantity, although I mean, but like Riley did just win Full Grip with it, as you said. So maybe that's a little surprising to see it at 5%. I would have maybe expected, I don't know, 7, 8, 9% or something like that. But I guess I would expect it to still be meta.
How about you, Rahul, on Duraludon?
I think Duraludon is like one of those Arceus variants that's a little bit more patient to navigate compared to the other ones. So far, like the more common Arceus variants that are like either straight Inteleon or like I don't know, Ice Rider feel like a little more aggressive, have a little bit more of a direction. But with Duraludon, it kind of feels like your direction is dictated by your opponent, so it's a far more reactive deck,
Mm-hmm.
which I think a lot of players are not patient enough to kind of do well. Riley is obviously an amazing player, so Riley was able to kind of sweep the tournament, but I think not every player can play at the same level of Riley.
Yeah.
So as soon as they find like one thing that's not working, they don't take the time to like figure it out with Duraludon, and they will sit
Mhm.
down and be like, "Well, Duraludon's not working. Let's go back to what works, which is Mew for them, because Mew has a high floor and a really high ceiling."
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Another
so
and another note about Riley's list too is that like I pointed this out in my flip side article, but it's a list that like looks exactly like something you'd play for the first weekend of a set
Yeah.
regional, right? It's just like
yeah,
4 of everything. There's no text. It's like it's good deck building for what the tournament was. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like does one thing really consistently.
correct. Yeah.
And I think people um who wanted to like take a more flexible approach to this meta for GG Tour and Celio stats might have not wanted to just like net deck Riley because it's a deck that gets a little bit less good as we get further into a format, and that kind of deck building sometimes doesn't get rewarded as much anymore.
Mhm.
So rather than like trusting, like these might just be players that don't trust themselves to deck build as well as some of the top players, and so they wanted to just like pick up somebody's Mew deck from the other day that they knew they could do well with.
Yeah, like the whole Mew VMAX thing is something that we'll keep coming back to, I think, because like, we see 20% plus people playing this deck consistently since it was released just about, and it's still not being punished too hard. Of course, like we've talked about, we have dark decks, we have decks with dark attackers, we have decks that are trying to tech against Mew with other things, Evil Tall Celebrations. I mean, even Duraludon can be potentially considered a Mew counter since it can't be hit by special energy. But Mew
Yeah.
VMAX is just doing that thing that we've seen these tier S decks do in the past, like ADPZ and Pika Rom. Like, how many times did we say Pika Rom was dead? And,
Yeah.
like these decks that just have the low deck space commitment because they're V and V max, and they have all these tools printed for them. They have the consistency, the aggression, the damage output cap. Mew VMAX just has a lot of things going for it. So if you don't have that perfect counter deck, or you're not confident in deck building, like Tate said, or you're not confident in piloting a deck that's reactive, because we haven't had a lot of reactive decks over the pandemic. And I do think a lot of these players that are in online events are either players that joined during the pandemic or came back to the game during the pandemic. And of course, we do have a lot of players that were here prior, but there are plenty of players who, like, in my coaching sessions or during Twitch streams, I'll reference like, okay, well, this kind
Yeah.
of plays like a 2017 deck X, Y, and Z, and these players weren't around 4 or 5 years ago for those decks that were reactive and those decks that had techs, and they're
Yep.
used to these decks that have been built kind of like glorified theme decks for the past 2 years because of what vmax's kind of did with just kind of like the plainness and the blandness, and also the lack of innovation with online events. Do you guys have any kind of like rogue decks to keep an eye on, or maybe not even rogue, but maybe like tier 2, tier 3 off meta that you think could be doing well today or well in the future regionals?
It's not so much a rogue because it's a known deck, but there's gonna be points in this format where Jolteon is actually gonna be really good. We've already seen it a little bit. Like,
Mhm.
I don't remember the tournament, but I think Jolteon did really well in the tournament the other day.
I was
And
playing
that's just
Jolteon
because,
in a
like,
tournament the other day.
yeah,
I didn't end up doing
yeah,
well
that's
by
right.
the end of it, but I played it because everyone was net
Yeah,
decking Riley's steraledon list, and so nobody was
right,
playing Crystal Cave or Hyperpot, so I could just
right.
sit there with
Which is a great example of,
Jolteon.
right, like, if everyone just net decks Riley's 60 and sticks with, like, me and Bradner were talking about this, like, we think what is it, Collapse Stadium, playing
Mhm.
for that might just not be super optimal for the rest of the format. Like, Crystal
No,
Cave
yeah.
does stuff, in metas, like, if people start playing Jolteon, like, I've been beating the Arceus Duraludon reasonably consistently with Jolteon,
Mhm.
which seems like something that should never happen, but,
Yep.
it's just,
Yeah,
like, people not playing Crystal Cave.
yeah, exactly Riley's list, right?
Yeah.
Because like you
Right,
said, those 4 collapse stadium, that's great against an unknown meta like the
right.
FGG tournament, and it's pretty good against a Mew. Just limit them one less Pokemon. That's one less card they get to draw every time off Genesect. And it's just like a card. Okay, this can generally help
Mhm,
sometimes against multiple things, but I definitely think they're better replaced by Crystal Caves, or at least a couple of
mhm.
them, going forward. And if people are stubborn and they don't do that, then like you said, something like Jolteon can still be good. And I think Jolteon's good
Yeah.
regardless. Just because people are kind of doing that thing already, like the old Giratina promo Greninja thing. Like, oh, nobody's gonna play Greninja because Giratina promo got released.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and you even saw, I mean, I think it was Andrew Hedrick maybe was playing Malamar with, like, no mana feed the other day because he was just
Yep.
like, "Well, no one's gonna play,"
yeah, no, a
and he
lot of
did
people are
fine.
doing that. Like
Yeah,
in the tournament I played Jolteon in, like over 75% of the Duraludons were Riley's exact list, and over
right,
50% of the dark boxes weren't playing Manaphy.
right. I
So
mean, I did the same thing as you, Luke, where I, like, queued into a small tournament with Jolteon, and the
mhm,
top 4 decks in the meta was, like, Mew, Malamar, Durant, Ice Rider, and I was like, "Alright, this is free."
mhm,
And then I hit, like, the one Rapid Strike and the one, like,
nice,
single strike with Urshi in his list or something, but, like,
very good.
yeah, Jolteon, I think, is definitely gonna be something that's gonna surprise people in terms of, like, maybe it's gonna win something or top 8 something kinda major in this format.
Yeah, I definitely think a confident Jolteon player can take it to top 8 of an upcoming regionals, like, just because they're going to hit a lot of people that thought Jolteon was off the map, and they know how to play
Yeah.
Jolteon. How about you, Rahul? Anything off meta down on the tier list do you think can come up?
Um, I think like Flaffy variants are like a sleeper deck. I haven't figured out how to play it yet, but I feel like Flaffy decks in some capacity, like Flaffy plus RCS plus like company is like
Mhm.
probably good in some capacity. Like decks of that nature have always been very, very good. It's
Mhm.
just figuring out, I think, the right formula and the right metagame to deal with it. Either whether it be Raichu, whether it be Rayquaza, whether it be something. And Wormadam also is something that's been like on my radar. I feel like it's a little bit short of where it needs to be.
Mhm.
But with Golisopod and all these other cards, it makes it like an actual like contender. Like at first, I built it as a complete meme, but it actually like can play. Like it can actually compete with everything, and it
Mhm.
feels not terrible. And realistically, you should smash Arceus decks. I think my third and like probably like final deck that I think needs to be worked on and can be really really good in a little bit more of a defined metagame is Sylveon. Um,
Mhm.
People have not touched Sylveon in quite a while, but I think like Sylveon plus Arceus plus Octillery is so much search and so much stuff together that there is like reasonably no way that you should not have an answer to a majority of matchups. Like couple that with Galarian Moltres, and maybe you don't even have to play Rapid Strike Energies. You could just play double turbos here on out.
Mhm.
Um, you have the recipe for a deck. It's just filling in those last 10 little slots, which can really make or break your tournament. But we can't do that at the beginning of a format,
Right.
unfortunately.
I mean, even Rapid Strike box is something I've been seeing a little on ladder and thinking, okay, you got like Blaziken, you got Zeraora, like yeah, Sylveon. Like the deck has tons of stuff that can deal with all these different decks, but it's just a matter of building it for a certain meta, like Rahul said.
Yeah, it's a deck
Um,
where it like the pieces are there, right? Like if
Yeah.
you want to counter X deck, you can play Path to the Peak. If you want to counter this, you play Blaziken
Yep.
VMAX. You want to counter this, you play Cheryl. But like it's making calculated guesses at what you need to counter that day and putting
Exactly.
that into your deck. Whereas playing Mew VMAX, going back to that, you don't have to make those decisions, right?
Nope.
You go on Play Limitless, you find the highest place in Mew VMAX list, and you roll with it. Even if it's not optimal,
Right.
you're still gonna you could still do well because it's Mew VMAX. It's kind of like ADPZ.
Right.
Like you could put 8 dead cards in ADPZ at its height, and you could still win games.
People are playing 8 dead cards in Mew, and they're still winning games.
Yeah. Like all of your Chromatics, all of your catchers,
Absolutely.
they could all be tails, and like you're still gonna win games.
Cram is
Yeah.
objectively bad in this format, I think.
Yeah.
I've also seen people playing like sub 4 Ultra Ball, which I think is just wrong. Like you should play 4 Ultra Ball. I don't know if you have an opinion on that rule, but
You have to play 4.
You have to
it's
play
just, like, way
4
too
Ultra.
good.
It's
I've
literally
seen
the
people
best.
like 2 Ultra Ball. It's like, have you guys read Ultra Ball?
Yeah.
You
It
know?
says you get to draw 3 extra cards with Genesect.
Yeah.
So any closing predictions for Celio stats today, whether it's the metagame shares, anything you think will be different, some decks you think might go top 8, things like that?
I forgot to mention this earlier. I was
Mhm.
gonna bring this up, but Azul said something, I think on Twitter. He was like, we were talking about what was gonna win the upcoming regionals in this format or something, and Azul was like, well, I plan on winning all the regionals, and I don't plan on playing Mew at any of them.
Mm.
So I'm gonna go with, and I think Mike Fouché said this, like he predicted Mew to have the most top 8s in the format, but not necessarily any wins. So I'm gonna echo Mike's prediction. I'm gonna go with Celio stats today, maybe like 3 Mew in top 8, but I think our winner is maybe gonna be some like weird Arceus deck or something like that.
I'm
That's my
gonna
guess.
flip that entirely and just go with the exact opposite that Mew is just going to win because, like I mentioned earlier, Mew has a very high floor and an even higher ceiling. So all it takes is one decent player to play it properly, and as long as they don't just like run face first into like single price dark or like a handful of bricks, they should
Mhm.
be able to just like giga roll this tournament. Um, yeah, that's just basically my stance on this.
Okay, cool. A closing
Well, we'll see.
question.
We'll see who's right, Rule.
Yeah,
One of us is right.
it's
Yeah,
either
Arceus,
Mew
one of us.
is winner or Mew is not winner. It's a 50-50 chance.
Exactly.
Rough.
I'm committing to Mew. Tate's committing to the field.
Yeah.
I'm hedging. I said 3 Mew in top 8, so also be kind of right.
Before we go, we have a couple minutes, but Rapid Strike Malamar. Going into the format, like there were some people whose opinions I respect saying it's very good.
What's the positive? The Rapid Strike Malamar deck is tremendously overpowered,
Yeah.
consistently 300 damages for 1 energy.
But like,
I think it's still good.
is it that good though? Like, is
we
it?
were all hyping it up on, at least like Frank really wanted to play it for full grip, I think, and then he made the Arceus Flygon thing.
Mhm.
But like we were all really high on Malamar. A lot of people were.
I think Malamar is going to be a sleeper deck as well for like Salt Lake and stuff because I don't think it's a deck you like generally bring to these things like these like best of 1 fiestas,
Mhm.
but in a
Right.
best of 3 where you're allowed to brick one game, I think
Right.
Mally can like steamroll. I've seen
Right.
like some
No,
test hands
absolutely.
and like stuff where like with Cynthia's Ambition, you are one-shotting a Mew,
Mhm.
which is crazy.
Absolutely.
You are
Yeah.
consistently one-shotting stuff on turn 2, which is
Yeah.
crazy. Like that should not
Yeah.
happen, but that's also like probably the upper variance, and I don't like playing decks like that because of the variance. But yeah,
Yeah, baby
Yeah.
Blounce.
No, I mean, it's
it's
certainly.
literally just baby blocks. I'm not doing that to myself again.
Yeah. No, it's right there with, I think, with Dark Box as like the best 1 prize deck for sure, and gaining Manaphy did like a huge thing for the deck. If people actually put Manaphy in the deck, it just like helps against those 2 matchups that it couldn't beat at all in the previous format. And so now if you think about it that way, like if you put Manaphy in the deck, it barely has bad matchups. It's just variance, as Rahul said.
Correct.
So I think maybe the time, one of the
Constraint,
constraints on it could
yeah.
be like time in best of 3,
You have
right?
to
At
be
a
able to scoop
regional.
one game quick if
Yeah,
you think you're gonna lose
exactly.
it.
But I mean, that's something that good players are gonna be able to do anyway. So
Yeah.
I think Malamar's not something I'd be shocked to see in top 8 of like Brisbane or Utah, honestly.
Yeah. It's
Awesome.
but it is 100% like Baby Blondes, where like on paper that in 2019 NAIC, everyone was like Baby Blonde, or like my group, I guess I got talked into Baby Blondes because it theoretically on paper had no bad matchups, besides
Except
bricking.
itself.
Yeah,
Right.
which is exactly what happened to a
Yeah,
majority
there's
of us.
always one of those decks.
Yeah. One question from chat before we head off to break before the tournament begins. Are you guys playing Cinccino or Inteleon in your Malamar deck if you like have to choose between them? Like if you're playing Malamar
Cinccino.
today, is it Cinccino or Intel?
Cinccino.
If you force me at gunpoint to play Malamar today, I'd play Cinccino.
I
Okay.
think
think it's
being able
more
to use level
consistent.
ball better is better. And yes, you don't get to net up rapid strike cards, but I think Cinccino's overall just more consistent in terms of like pitching cards, going deeper with
Yeah.
Cynthia's Ambition. Like
I
Cynthia's
mean,
Ambition plus
the
that,
thinning component is huge, right? Just getting all
it,
that stuff out of your deck in the late game is so
eventually
good.
your deck has to just be all rapid strike cards, and
Exactly.
that's the scariest part about the deck, and that's not
Right.
what Inteleon does for you.
Right.
Yeah, I've personally enjoyed Cinccino, but then I have friends who really think Inteleon is the best way to go. And so
I mean,
I'm interested
maybe
to see if it's a preference
yeah, it has a higher ceiling, I guess, but
with
like
Inteleon, right?
I'm not willing, yeah, with Inteleon, but I don't think I'm willing to sacrifice. Like Cinccino is just good every game. It does,
Mhm.
it's so good for the deck every game in setting up and in thinning. And Inteleon, you're just gonna like brick way more than you're gonna high roll, I think.
Correct. It takes up too many slots.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm interested if it becomes clear in this format if it's a preference on which one you like or if there is a clear-cut winner.
I don't think there's preferences in Pokemon. I think either it's optimal or it's not, and I think Cinccino is optimal.
All right.
Hold on, I think there's preferences, but continue.
No, it's either it's good or it's bad.
All right. Well,
No,
Tate
there
says
is to
your
an
Rapid
extent.
Strike Malamar decks with Inteleon are bad. You can take that up with him.
No.
Yeah,
I'm
he
being
said it's bad.
I'm
I
having
said it could be okay, so I don't
having a
take any
tape
heat.
moment. I'm having a tape moment.
We're
But
gonna.
I do think Cinccino is better.
Okay, so we're going to cut to a short break, and the tournament will be beginning at 4 p.m. Eastern. We have over 300 players registered, so everybody in chat who's playing, good luck, and we'll be back with round 1 in about 20 minutes or so. So we'll see y'all then.